Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the most overpowered Amon build in Borderlands 4 utilizing the Axe Crucible skill tree. Now, it got quite a buff in the latest update. Unfortunately, it's not enough of the buff, and I was testing out a bunch of different combinations, and I found that if we activate a different skill tree and utilize the skills gathered in that one, we can actually get a very powerful build put together. So I guess an overview of this build will be mostly in the green skill tree, but a majority actually in the red. So you don't have to get your capstones here. That's the thing with this, is that our regular ability double edge is so good naturally that it's not actually a good thing to add a cooldown timer unless we want to grab the snowball, but this skill tree side is not that great outside of a couple different skill tree nodes. So we're actually going to utilize the red skill tree here because it got some pretty big buffs. This allows our axes to critically hit with the discombobulate. It also, with the titanium knuckles, gives us extra melee damage, which applies to that. And then we can go into our berserk. Whenever we activate our forge skill, we become berserk. And then there's only red, which will boost up the overall crowd damage as we continue to take out enemies. And then the kicker, the craziest part about this, my touch is death. Whenever Amon deals melee damage, there's a chance to activate kill skills. And the beautiful thing about this is whenever we activate our kill skills, the tempered pyre and our little forge drones actually deal melee damage, which do trigger this ability here, which it's funny. We're going down to get the capstone area of the red skill tree, but we're going to stick with the blue skill tree because we don't actually need the other changes. And this also gives us pretty consistent uptime on our invincibility, 6 seconds of invincibility whenever we use our 30-second cooldown and double edge. It's overall pretty crazy. The nice thing about this build is it actually works great from the very early game all the way through to Ultimate Vault Hunter 5 at level 50. Now, we got a really good choice here between these two. So the Executioner will give you 20% extra critical hit damage, doubled after dealing melee damage. And again, we can trigger melee damage easily with our Tempered Pyre, which we get at our next level. And that 40% extra critical damage is actually quite nice because we want to be aiming for critical hits if at all possible. We don't need the crit knife here. Obviously, that's going to boost things up, but we're going to utilize this without the crit knife as this is just a really good build in general. I like the Gathered Storm though. We get 15% extra elemental damage per stack. We can double up on this and last for 14 seconds. We get 3 stacks for plus 45% elemental damage. I do think the Executioner does edge this out a little bit. We got a tough decision here. I actually give a bit of a preference to Executioner because we don't have to then utilize elemental damage, but both of these choices are really good. Now we want to take one level in the Tempered Pyre here. This allows us to get the Forge Drone whenever we activate our Forge skill. This means the double edge. So whenever we throw our twinned Forge Axe, we create this. The damage isn't worth investing more points into it, to be honest. It's just going to keep increasing the damage, and it's not enough to make it worthwhile doing. We just want this to proc our abilities. We then can go ahead with taking one of the augments here. Axe and Stone is actually probably the better one, giving you increased movement speed, and you get cooldown restoration from this. The Endless War is good if you want to stack up extra gun damage, but for our playstyle, Axe and Stone is a little bit better for right now. Now we can also grab the detonation damage here. This one can actually be really good because if we want to really focus on detonation, with this we can get an additional 40% detonation damage, which is nice. However, I also like the bolt action here. So whenever we reload our gun, we get bonus shock damage for a duration of 4 seconds. 24% bonus damage is quite nice, especially considering that with some guns we can reload often, and applying shock with some of the abilities in the skill tree, we can actually do some pretty good damage. But just depends. If you want to get more detonation damage for our axes there, forge skill damage doesn't matter to us at all, really. It's nice and all, but it's really for that detonation damage. So you got a choice there. If you want more shock damage, I'm going to go with this one here and take 4 points in it here. And then we can go ahead with taking the Twin Tempers. This just gives us a second forge drone. So we got a fire and an ice one, which will both proc our abilities here, which is just great. That's what we want. Now we also got this here, kill skill, get increased critical hit chance, which can be pretty decent if we're not using guns that are going to set up critical hits or if we're not aiming for the head. Personally, I like the bellows here. 8 seconds, and we have a cooldown of 30 seconds on our forward skill. This will give us increased gun damage by 28%. This can be pretty nice, especially just because of the amount of times we're going to be activating our forward skill. So an extra 28% damage can be nice. If you don't want to take this, however, you can just go back and take the bolt action. I think this is pretty good, though, because the extra bonus shock damage is nice. And we're going to be reloading quite often. Now, at this point, Searing Cold is, I think, the best augment for this build because Frost X will apply freeze on impact. So for general mobbing, you can just freeze a bunch of enemies, and the Flame Axes will actually pass through enemies. This is really good because you can then double up on the fire damage, and they do a pretty good amount of damage there. But on top of that, the freeze is super useful. Blade Tempest and the Hour of the Hammer can be fun, especially if you want to do more of a frost focus, but I think that this ends up being better. Now, we also can get a additional Forge Drone here with the Tempered Ice. This will be activated whenever we use our Ordnance, which is pretty crazy. I like this just, again, to trigger more melee damage. We're not really going to be needing any of these. This one also gives us a shock forge drone, which does shock melee damage. I just like to have these just for the activation of our later skill trees. So now we're going to go into the red skill tree. This combobulates really crazy because we get increased melee critical hit chance of 25%. This is melee damage. So we now have a 1 in 4 chance of landing a critical hit with our action skill, which becomes pretty crazy damage. Next, we're going to then take the Tritanium Knuckles. That's a 40% boost in melee. They actually boosted it up even further with the last patch. So we now get bonus 40% melee damage, which also, again, applies to our Crucible. Great. Then as we continue down, we can take the Forged in Steel. So whenever we use our Forge skill, which is 30-second of a cooldown, we then get our action skill back, which is crazy because some of these other choices have like a 60-second Forge skill. So we have half of that to get our action skill back. And then this leaves us with a few other choices here. I really like the best defense. We gain overshield when we deal melee damage. We don't need to take too many stacks in this, but this will just give us a bit of a sustain on the build. I also like to take a single level in the gut punch because whenever we do melee damage or ordnance, we can apply the weakness to an enemy, which makes it deal 40% less damage, and we deal 20% more damage for 8 seconds. That's pretty good. I also like the heavy play. This will give us maximum overshield and overshield capacity because we are actually going to be using overshield quite a bit on this build. You can take, like, we got the overshield from this, and this kind of stacks together. You can just go with more points in the gut punch there, and even status effect damage is pretty decent, but 1 point there doesn't hurt, a little extra shields. Now we got our best choices with the Berserk. So whenever Amon activates his Forge skill, he becomes Berserk for 15 seconds, gaining slow immunity, bonus crowd damage with gun, and melee damage. So that's 30% extra damage on our attacks, and a 30-second cooldown, so we get our Berserk up often. Even greater, we then get there's only red kill skill whenever Amon kills an enemy while Berserk is active, partially restores duration by 9 seconds. So yeah, we can then stay in this pretty much indefinitely because we're going to be killing things pretty quickly, and give us bonus crowd damage, so upwards of 600% bonus damage. Every time we take out an enemy, we get a bonus 60% more damage. So yeah, these two together actually become very crazy. You're going to see enemies freeze consistently with this. And then we got to take a couple more points. I like the Rhyme Break. Whenever our shield breaks, we restore it and detonate. So this will give crowd damage to nearby enemies. The damage isn't so much, it's more so the restoration. This is a cooldown of 45 seconds. So we can use that just to give us a bit of extra shield and sustain there. And then I also like to go with the Bloodlust here. So whenever Amon shields break, he gains Bloodlust for a duration. This will give us lifesteal when our shield breaks. It will break, and getting some lifesteal is great. Now we're going to take My Touch's Death. So whenever we deal melee damage, we have a chance to activate our kill skills. Now this will trigger the extra elemental damage if you took that in the green skill tree, but it's mostly here to just activate There's Only Red, because we can get that upwards of 600% bonus damage from Cryo, which is crazy. So utilizing this together, My Touch's Death will be proccing often from our different Forge drones we have flying around, and this just becomes absolutely nuts. Now for our last 4 skill points, you can go back to this skill tree here and take this to give ourselves a chance to critically hit with our action skill, but I mean, we already get another ability to do that, so that's not our absolute best choice. I think it's good to go with actually the Brim and Vigor here because we get additional health capacity, which is great for survivability, but whenever we have maximum health, we get more melee damage added to our attack. So that's 30 or 28% extra melee damage when our health is full. We're going to try and keep our health full as much as possible because we have other ways of sustaining overshield to make sure that we don't touch our health. You can also add in Dragon's Breath or the Catastrophe for additional fire and shock damage, which can be nice to be able to actually stack up extra critical hit chance and damage. But I think getting a little bit extra sustain, because Berserk, There Is Only Red, My Touch's Death, and then Brimming Vigor with the Crucible here and going through mostly just to get the different Forge drones to activate our skills. I think is the best way to go about doing this. We're still going to use our axes for the Forge skill because I think they are better than the Onslaughter, even without using a capstone. And this is because of our class mod here, the Viking. So Crucible gains 2 charges, increased duration, and grants Amon additional damage reduction while it's active. So we can then go ahead with throwing around a couple more axes, which is nice. This also increases our detonation damage by 45% and ordnance damage by 45%. So that can be pretty crazy, especially if we're using an LMG type one here. There's others that work decently well, like the Elementalist can be fun. I do also enjoy the Blacksmith, so a kill skill will partially restore all Forge drones duration. Now, the Forge drones are not really that effective. This is going to be more so if you want to use gun damage. This will also give them more duration of 33% and then also additional health capacity on our character. The Forge skills can be used once while on a cooldown. Is also a pretty effective one because when we use this ability, this lets us do the Forge skill and then use the Forge skill again. And whenever we use it again, we get that again. That's 6 seconds of immunity to all damage. This also gives us assault rifle damage. I got lucky with that, and Forge skill damage, which Forge skill damage isn't amazing. These other ones don't actually apply to it. So the best one, in my opinion, is the Viking for the additional 2 axe throws. I think that's just great. Now, the Watts for Dinner actually is a great shield here on really a lot of builds because it gives you the overshield charges that you can pick up and then additional shock damage whenever we have those. We already have additional shock damage, however, so it's not super necessary. This will also give us the chance of getting overshield. You could go potentially into the Timekeeper's new shield if you wanted to take out the skill points related to your shield and then just use this to be able to keep yourself alive. I think that's a pretty fun playstyle. And the Cinder Shelly is also a really good one here, giving you a boost to your overall survivability. And then additionally, the Onion is always a good choice with the armor segments breaking, giving you immunity to damage for 2 seconds. And why that's crazy is because you got 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, it's 8 seconds, plus the 6 seconds of immunity that we have from our activating our Forge skill, and then you're likely going to get the skill cooldown back. So you can become pretty much immortal with that one there. It's kind of fun, but even the super soldiers are pretty effective as well, giving you the additional gun restoration and all that too. Now, for the best enhancement, I think the choice is always going to be the Bounce Pass, giving you additional ricochets with the Jacob's License parts, and Hot Slugger's great. Rainbow Vomit with that's good too. TK's Wave, I have the GMR, AMR, so all these are really good on top of this because they'll chain around. This also has 25% bonus gun damage, which is a massive boost because this will apply to certain guns multiple times, like the BOD. Now, for our Ordnance, there's lots of really good ones. I like a heavy Ordnance. I just enjoy the usefulness of this on a build like this. However, I think the best choice is actually the Slippy Grenade here because this does melee damage on detonation, and it also has Lifesteal, which will keep us sustained. This will also proc our There Is Only Red and all the other kill skill abilities, so this is a great choice too. And the Triple Bypass, this also has a Shock Nova. Get the one with the extra damage, amp shot, it's nice. But this will actually, with our Specialization, give us our action skill back really fast. Now for our weapons here, Katagawa's Revenge is going to be one of the best. With the Jacob's License accessory, this is going to be one of the absolute best weapons in the game because it can proc a lot of extra damage off with the shock version of it. The Rainbow Vomit's great too because you can get additional elemental damage on your guns. This gives additional shock, fire, and crowd damage. It's crazy, and it'll also ricochet around to multiple enemies. I enjoy the Hot Slugger. This is one of the best guns in the game. Additional damage. And then the GMR is great too, because this will actually chain around to multiple enemies, and this fires like a normal AR. So it's just a fun, easy gun to use. You don't have to think too much, just shoot it. You can also add in like the Goalkeeper, which has a crazy DPS because it charges up your shots. And then you also have the Kill Drone on that one, which is pretty great. Chaosin does Chaosin things, pretty crazy gun overall. Wombo Combo, another good choice in weapons here, because this actually can be great against vile enemies, blowing up their crystals. Lucian's Flank, always a good choice. I like the Lucian's Flank with shock damage. I have one somewhere here in this mess. I wish you could sort it by type a little bit easier like that. And the XXL, any of these snipers are also great choice. I like the Stray as well, sniper with the critical hit rebounding, and Hellwalker for the Doom vibes. And I did mention this briefly, but the BOD gets additional damage added 5 times because it has 5 properties of guns. So that gun damage that we got from this, 25% actually applies 5 times onto BOD. And for our specializations, the Daredevil is going to be our best choice here because this gives us now with caffeine, whenever we use our Repkit, we get 25% of our action skill cooldown back. So 3 spams of the triple bypass, boom, you get 75% of your action skill back. This is nuts. We also got I Am a Gun. Action skill now benefits from increases to gun damage by 50%. So this 25% boost that we get from our enhancement here is adding 12.5% onto our action skill axe throws, which is great. And that's multiplicative. It gives you a bunch of extra damage too. Very well useful. The Honed Mind here, action skills get a critical hit chance of 5% and additional critical hit damage. It's also quite nice because we also have the melee critical hit chance too. So this all combines together. And the most important one here is Bare Arms. Melee damage now benefits from increases to gun damage. So yeah, we get the double dip here from I Am a Gun and Bare Arms, putting our action skill damage up pretty crazy. Now what makes this great is that we can activate our Forge skill here, throw that axe, and then whenever we call it there, we got our axes there going and getting us kill skills. So on bosses that we traditionally won't be able to get kill skills off and get our berserkering abilities, we're now able to do that. So that makes this much more powerful. Then we have our Slippery Grenade there, which does crazy damage. The Slippery Grenade is great because it's going to bounce around and do our melee damage over time on the enemy there, further enhancing our abilities. And then we got our Forge axes here. This is resisting fire damage, which kind of sucks, but you can always freeze a boss, and the great thing about that is it's going to slow them down and make a lot of their attacks much more useless. So Katagawa's Revenge is the gun that I'm using right there, and then we can switch to this is just a Wombo Combo, which is a really good one because it's cryo damage on it. Dipping into the blue skill tree I was experimenting with, and the blue skill tree will give you additional cryo damage, which is nice, and it can actually work on this build pretty decently well, but I found that this just worked a little bit better, and then you can always just go ahead, throw your forward skill, giving you that 6 seconds of immunity to damage, which is crazy, and then you can play a little bit more aggressively while doing that. So again, this is an Ultimate Vault Hunter 5. Now, obviously, that's not as quick of a kill speed as some of the other heroes here in the game. That's because Amon's kit is still likely going to get a lot more buffs and other changes, but that's pretty decent. He's got crazy survivability, sustain up, like he survives forever. You can't do too much against him if you're a boss because he's just going to live forever. So let me know your thoughts in the most powerful, I guess, Crucible build for Amon here. He's going to be a beast once the level skill cap increases, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.